Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us for the kickoff for the Metro Atlanta Climate Action Plan. I'm Crystal Jackson. I'm Planning Manager for Climate and Sustainability in ARC's Natural Resources Group and the lead coordinator for our Climate Action Planning work. We are still waiting for several people to come onto the webinar, but we'll go ahead and get going. As you can see, there's several things to do while you wait. Your microphones and cameras have been muted, but you are able to use the chat to post a question, and we'll get to those questions at the end of the webinar after we've done the presentation. And additional links in today's slides will be available after the webinar on both the CPRG website at ARC and the Metro Atlanta Climate Action Plan public input websites, and we'll provide the links to those at the end of this webinar. So with that, let's get started. I can advance the slides here. There we go. So on today's agenda, we're going to do a quick recap of the Atlanta Metropolitan Statistical Area Priority Climate Action Plan overview, do a review of the CPRG implementation grants, and give an update on that. But the main focus of today's webinar is to talk about the Metro Atlanta Climate Action Plan, the timeline for that, the purpose of it, and opportunities for you all and your communities to be engaged. But before we get to that, I'd like to introduce Mike Alexander, our Chief Operating Officer here at ARC, to give a quick welcome.
Hey, everyone. Thank you so much for being on the webinar today. Again, I'm Mike Alexander, the COO of the ARC. On behalf of my boss, Anna Roach, the CEO and Executive Director of the Atlanta Regional Commission and the Commission itself. We can't say enough how much we are excited to be in this work with you. We know it's going to take all of us working so diligently to make sure we do everything we can to meet the goals that have been set forth and all the things that are helping us to implement these plans. So I'm very excited about this work. We really need to do our best. It means a lot to us as staff working for our commission in this. So if we can be of any assistance to you or any other additional things we can help you with, we're clearly here to do that. So we've got a great team leading this work, including Crystal, and I'm so excited about it. And it always makes my heart happy. I'm sitting here with Crystal, and her cup says, "Storm the watershed." She is really someone that takes this work so seriously. So thank you so much.
Thanks, Mike. And we'll dive right in, because we're going to storm the watershed. So we'll start off with a slide that may be familiar to you all. This is ARC's mission, vision, values, and goals. We aim to create one great region for everybody, and we want to do that through fostering thriving communities for all within the Atlanta region through collaborative data-informed planning and investments. We value excellence, integrity, and equity, and we have several goals over there on the side that I believe that the Climate Action Plan meets pretty much nearly every goal, or will aim to meet all of those goals. So just a reminder of what ARC, the Atlanta Regional Commission, is about. And real quickly, we'll do a recap of where we've been to date. The Climate Pollution Reduction Grant through EPA is a planning grant that is $1 million over 4 years with 3 deliverables. We have 4 deliverables here because there's a second phase. But we started a priority climate action planning process about this time last year, and we completed the Atlanta MSA Priority Climate Action Plan and submitted it to EPA in March of this year. That is available both on ARC's CPRG website as well as the EPA CPRG website. And that plan was really just to identify near-term, high-priority, implementation-ready measures to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. And one big reason for doing that plan was to allow municipalities, local governments, and agencies such as ARC and the state to apply for competitive grants for projects that were intended to implement one or more priority climate action plan measures that were in the plan. And those proposals were submitted to EPA on April 1st of this year. So now we are getting ready to start, as of today, the Comprehensive Climate Action Plan, which is a deliverable under the CPRG planning grant. We are going to refer to that as the Metro Atlanta Climate Action Plan, or MACAP. And that will build on the PCAP that was submitted in March. But it will be what I consider a true climate action plan, a comprehensive across all sectors, identifying both near-term and long-term greenhouse gas emissions reduction goals and prioritize measures to achieve those goals. And it will be due around October of next year. There's some flexibility in the due date, but we are aiming for October to allow some time for us to complete the plan and to have our RC board adopt it for the 11 county region. And the last deliverable of the 4-year planning grant is a status report in 2027 to give an update to EPA of the implementation status of any quantified measures included in the MOCAP. Just to review, the planning area is the Atlanta Metropolitan Statistical Area, which is larger than ARC's typical planning footprints. In the red, you'll see the 11 county typical ARC Regional Commission footprint. In the shaded blue is our 20 county Metropolitan Planning Organization. Geography, which is for transportation and air quality planning. But the EPA wanted these plans to be done on an MSA level. So for this instance, we are working in 29 counties and 150 cities, and that is the largest geography that you see there on the screen. Quick overview and review of the Priority Climate Action Plan. Several of you were involved in that process and the 3 webinars that we did for that. So you're probably familiar with this, but for those who are new, who are may or may not have been involved in a while, we, like I said, submitted the PCAP to EPA on March 1st. It included a greenhouse gas inventory, which built on the Drawdown Georgia statewide emissions inventory, a quantified greenhouse gas reduction measures, a list of those that I mentioned that are kind of the near term, what is achievable, what needs funding, what can we get on the ground within the next few years, list of measures. A benefits analysis, which was a qualitative discussion of potential co-benefits that could result if we implemented these reduction measures. A low-income disadvantaged communities benefits analysis, identifying both the LIDAC block groups and potential benefits and concerns of those communities. And then a review of the authority to implement. So any measure that was proposed, we had to review and figure out, is this something that is legally already able to be done within the state of Georgia? And if not, how do we put into the plan already to be done in the state of Georgia? Just some highlights. Here's our 2019 gross emissions by sector greenhouse gas inventory. Again, the source was Drawdown Georgia data tracker. You can see that our largest, if you look at it, broken down into agriculture, industry, commercial, residential, and transportation. Transportation is our largest source. However, if you combine both commercial and residential buildings, those are our largest source of greenhouse gas emissions at 44% versus the 41% for transportation. Industry is about 14% and agriculture is about 1%. You can see over on the right, this is a different sort of breakdown of this. And here you'll see that we actually include the sink of forestry, which actually absorbs greenhouse gas emissions and carbon. So that's a great plus for our MSA. Again, you can see the different sectors. And what we've done here is we've broken out the consumed electricity and the residential, commercial, and industrial sector. So you can see the bulk of the greenhouse gas emissions in those sectors comes from consumed electricity. And I'll just quickly go through. We had 14 priority greenhouse gas reduction measures. We included the transportation sector, the building sector, which also includes some renewable energy, and the waste and recycling sector, as well as a overarching category of sectors. So we had in measures that looked at electrifying fleets, expanding EV charging, incentivizing the use of e-bikes, encouraging other transportation mode shifts, transitioning to energy efficient rail cars, and converting fleet vehicles from diesel to other cleaner fuels other than EV. We also looked at electrifying buildings, increasing energy efficiency in industrial and commercial buildings, including multifamily buildings, increasing energy efficiency in single family homes, and increasing the use of solar photovoltaics on buildings, both on government buildings, industrial buildings, homes, and looking at increasing community-based solar. And the last three are increasing the use of wastewater biogas to energy, increasing diversion of waste from landfills, and incentivizing local governments to adopt climate mitigating policies, ordinances, and programs. So again, this Priority Climate Action Plan was not the end all and be all of action plans, but it was really a way to allow folks to see what some of the top measures that are ready to go in the region were, and to be able to apply for funding to implement those measures. And this is just a couple of screenshots of what the layout looks like in the PCAP. So for each measure, we gave an overview of the measure, why it's important. We had to calculate the greenhouse gas reduction potential for each measure through 2030 and 2050. We provided a list of qualitative co-benefits for each measure, identified who could potentially implement these measures, estimated schedule and milestones, the geographic location, and potential measures for tracking progress. The Low-Income Disadvantaged Communities Analysis, or LIDAC, as EPA refers to those communities, included a survey that we did jointly with the state of Georgia, their Environmental Protection Division, who's the lead for their CPRG plan, and got a good number of responses. You see over on the right, there's a map. It's kind of hard to tell what's going on, but the blue, the kind of teal areas are low-income disadvantaged communities as identified through the various EPA tools. And then the red are the areas that we received survey responses from. So you can see we got a good coverage of many of the low-income disadvantaged communities areas. And this survey particularly asked folks to think about the benefits of greenhouse gas emissions reduction measures and potential concerns. And you can see that the top three benefits that were identified were improved public health, increased transportation options, and community resilience. Some of the concerns included disproportionate impacts, loss of jobs, and burdensome regulations. And like I said, we partnered with the state of Georgia Environmental Protection Division. We also have partnered with Drawdown Georgia, Urban Sustainability Directors Network, Southeast Sustainability Directors Network, GreenLink Analytics, and also multiple state agencies throughout the PCAP process. And we'll be continuing that through the CCAP process. So the next point of the agenda is the CPRG implementation grant proposals. Just to remind you all, this was about $4.3 million of competitive funding through EPA. And EPA, when they released the requirements for the grant, so that they would fund anywhere from 400 to 300 applicants. And so ARC put in 2 applications. That was the max that we were allowed. One to enhance our Green Communities program and expand it. The other to expand our e-bike program and offer a transit incentives program, not only to the 20 county region, but also to several local governments throughout the state. And then ARC also assisted a coalition of local governments to identify an EV fleet project, 9 local governments to transition to almost 500 EVs and chargers, including some that would be charged by solar. So several great projects there related to the PCAP. And here is who was funded. We learned, I believe it was late July of this year, that EPA selected 25 applications across the US out of thousands that they received, including ours. They are funding projects in 13 states, 11 municipalities or MSAs, and 1 tribal location for a total of $4.3 billion. And you can see in the geographic distribution that there's not a lot of funding going to the Southeast, which we were hoping to see at least 1 project in Georgia, but we're not successful. But we are not disheartened. here's the funding by sector. So a lot of it went to transportation and buildings. Very minimal went to electric, power, and waste and materials management. And I say we're not disheartened because through the process, as I mentioned in previous webinars, we were building new conversations, having conversations with local governments and entities that we've not had conversations with before, and building coalitions of local governments that maybe have not worked on a project together before. And so those are relationships that still exist despite not receiving funding. And we've got some good core projects that we can propose for future funding opportunities. And this is kind of a busy graphic here, but this is a screenshot from the Climate Program Portal, which is a free resource for local governments to look at IJA funding, Inflation Reduction Act funding, and other federal funding sources. And they do a great job of providing the announcements and due dates and identifying any other upcoming opportunities and anticipating when those opportunities might open up. So this is just one screenshot. This list goes on for a while, but you can see there's a lot of opportunities for funding still out there. And so we are keeping an eye on these opportunities. We hope that the folks who also applied for EPA CPRG funding are also keeping an eye on this so that when something comes up that we can, redirect those proposals into that. We'll be doing that. And we're looking for other funding opportunities as well. So now the main point of this webinar is the Metro Atlanta Climate Action Plan, or MACAP. This is what EPA would consider our comprehensive climate action plan. And it builds upon the PCAP. So we'll flesh out our GHG inventory to be more comprehensive. We'll add a whole suite of potential greenhouse gas reduction measures across all sectors and calculate the co-benefits as well as the emissions reduction potential of each measure. We'll do another benefits analysis that will be more comprehensive. It will analyze the co-pollutant changes resulting from the implementation of these greenhouse gas reduction measures and other co-benefits, such as the ones that you saw in the previous slide. We'll also do another round of analysis of low-income and disadvantaged communities to be sure that we are knowledgeable and aware of any potential benefits, but also the potential disbenefits associated with these emissions reduction measures. We'll do another review of authority to implement for all the measures. And then the additional requirements for this plan include greenhouse gas emissions projections, both near term through 2035 and long term through 2050. Which will be a comprehensive economy-wide greenhouse gas future years emissions projections. We'll also set emissions reduction targets, both near term through 2035 and then through 2050 long term. Again, comprehensive economy-wide greenhouse gas reduction targets. We'll do a workforce planning analysis to determine, if all of these measures were implemented, what are the strengths and weaknesses of our existing workforce, and what do we need to do to plan to build a workforce that is ready to help implement these measures. And then intersection with other funding availability is to look at what remains out there other than EPA funding that might relate to these measures that we're proposing and identifying where they intersect with what we're proposing. And ultimately, the way I envision this plan is for it to be a menu for local governments and other entities to be able to refer to as they are thinking about what they'd like to do in the way of greenhouse gas reductions, and offer them a tool that they can pull from as they're putting together their plans. So the timeline, broken down into the different components, we have been doing research and planning since April. And we are beginning our stakeholder engagement. We published a public input site last month, and this is our first of several stakeholder meetings. We aim to have a stakeholder meeting every other month through next June, and that will track along with the requirements as we're developing the requirements for the plan. So the next couple of months, we'll be working on the greenhouse gas inventory. October, November, we'll be developing the projections and targets. And November, December, we'll be finalizing the comprehensive list of measures that we think we will need to put in place to meet these projections and targets. And then we'll start January through March of next year, actually doing all the calculations for each measure, which is a pretty intensive process. So we want to allow enough time to do that. And while that's going on, we'll be doing the workforce analysis and the LIDAC analysis, additional engagement, as we're putting together the plan. And starting to draft that plan, which we will have a draft by next May. And then we will be finalizing the MOCAP by August of next year, and hope to have official adoption by the ARC board and submit it to EPA in October 2025. And so opportunities to engage with this plan. I want to point out that the state of Georgia Environmental Protection Division has been working on the state CPRG plan, and they wanted me to let you know that you can receive updates using the QR code on the left and view their CPRG website using the QR code on the right. So I'll give you a couple of seconds to snap those. And this PowerPoint will also be available after today's webinar in case you don't get those. And then for ARC, we want to hear from you and your community. Like I said, we put together this public input website. There's a screenshot on the right. And there's many things going on this site. There's an explanation of what is climate change, why should we be concerned about it. There is an overview of the climate action plan and what we hope to get out of it. There is a community visioning survey, as well as a climate priorities survey. Both of those are directly on there. We will be posting any upcoming webinars there as well as past presentations such as today's webinar. You'll also be able to sign up for updates. So if you want to receive emails or heads up about future webinars, or if we have a new survey that's coming out, you can sign up to receive updates. We promise we won't send too many. You can also request a speaker. So if you're having a community event or you're part of an organization that you think might like to hear about this and give us input, you can go on to this website and request a speaker. And we'll do our best to be able to attend. And then most importantly, share this with your friends and family. We would like to reach as much of the 29 county MSA as possible. It's a large geography. It's about 57% of the state's population. So we need all the help we can get in getting the word out there. So if you get an email from us about a webinar, or if you just want to share these surveys with your friends, please do so. The QR code will take you to this website, and then the URL is there as well if you want to type that in. And finally, we have other great things in regards to climate change and resilience going on here at ARC. We have a webpage, atlantaregional.org/climate, where you can find out about all the great things that we are working on or that we have coming up. And there's also a direct email address to reach us. That's climate@atlantaregional.org. And we encourage you to send us an email if you have any questions or comments in that way as well. And that concludes my presentation. So we have about 30 or so minutes for Q&A. I am going to shift here from presenting and we'll go to Q&A. And the way that we'll do that is I have John Phillipsborn, who is our managing director for climate and resilience here at ARC, who will go through the chat and address questions, and we will answer those questions as we get to them.
Thanks,
John,
Crystal.
Okay, awesome.
Yeah, thanks, Crystal. And just a reminder, anyone, please feel free to use the chat to ask questions. We'll answer them as we can going forward. Ashley wrote, "Hi, thank you for hosting. Will we have access to recording of today's session?" And Crystal, I hosted. The answer is yes, and they'll be posted along with previous webinars and other information on ARC's Climate Pollution Reduction Grant webpage, which I've provided the link for. So everyone can please use that. Also, Crystal's QR code should take you thereabouts. So next question came from Henry Slack. Among the state agencies who worked on this plan, did that include the Public Service Commission? If not, why not?
So no, the Public Service Commission did not work on this plan. The PCAP was done in a very short time frame and with a very specific purpose in mind, and that was providing essentially a framework of measures that municipalities and agencies could choose from to submit implementation grant proposals to EPA. We did reach out to other state agencies like EPD, GFA, the ATL Transit Authority, and I'm blanking on some of the others, MARTA, but we did not reach out to the PSC. But we can keep them in mind as we are going forward with the MOCAP process. We will be convening public agencies quarterly to get their input and ideas. So we'll add them to the list.
Great, thanks, Crystal. Henry Slack also asked, after Katrina, Atlanta had thousands of New Orleans residents move to this area. Do we have plans for the tens of thousands that will move here from Miami, Jacksonville, Savannah, and Charleston as they flood more often? And Crystal, I might take this and just say that per EPA, the PCAP and MOCAP were specifically to focus on greenhouse gas emissions reductions, and so not address issues like those. However, ARC is doing a number of different activities that are and relate to climate impacts and climate vulnerabilities. And so you will see more of that to come from ARC in the future via other plans. So to Crystal's last slide, please keep posted and check in on the work that we're doing in other areas like the ones you bring up. Next question came from Brian. Brian says, you mentioned that the MOCAP will have a near-term and a longer-term GHG emissions reduction target. Does ARC plan to adopt these targets to guide its work more broadly? For example, in the next update of the Regional Transportation Plan?
John, do you want to talk about some of our coordination work here?
Sure. So, Brian, this plan is going to go before the board for board approval. We are also coordinating this plan with members of our transportation department and working closely so that the recommendations and strategies specifically in the transportation sector that come out of the MOCAP are shared with them and have an opportunity to take some life in all of our transportation planning, including the Regional Transportation Plan. So more to come on that. No specifics because nothing specific has come out of the MOCAP yet, but the opportunity is absolutely for the work that we're doing here to influence all of our work, including in our transportation planning.
Thanks, John.
Ashley then asks, what is the difference between the GHG inventory included in the PCAP and the comprehensive version to be included in the MOCAP?
There's actually not much difference. We went ahead and did a more comprehensive version of the inventory for the PCAP, which identified emissions by sectors. We could have done a more simplified version, so it's not going to change much. I don't know if Shelby Miller is on the webinar, but she's the one who has been working on the inventory and may have a little bit more insight into the differences, but it will mainly be the same with maybe a little bit more detail on the breakdown of greenhouse gases, so not just CO2 equivalent, but the other greenhouse gases that roll into that equivalent. Shelby, are you on?
Shelby is here with me and getting a thumbs up. That's a good answer, Crystal, on the breakdown.
Perfect, thank you.
Good. Okay, next question came from Lynn. Would a central energy plant with geothermal and or solar power possibly qualify for grant funding? If so, what do we need to submit for consideration?
So for the CPRG implementation grant that was due back in April, I think that would have been a totally acceptable application. However, that funding is already allocated. EPA has not indicated that they will do another CPRG implementation grant round. So any other funding opportunities would come from either the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act or the Inflation Reduction Act or other federal funding opportunities that were shown through the climate program portal. So I wouldn't be able to tell you what the requirements are for those, but it seems to me with all of the federal funding that's coming out, there's a good possibility that something might be there that would be able to fund your project.
And I would just add to that, Crystal, that ARC has been tracking and posting opportunities through the IIJA and IRA, different funding opportunities, and that is available on ARC's website. And after Q&A, I will post that link into this chat for reference. Scott asks, in doing the PCAP, were there any issues that came up that will need a regional approach?
Not that I can think of offhand. I mean, obviously, a lot of these measures can be implemented by individual local governments. There is the potential for a regional approach for things, but there was nothing specifically that we thought required a regional approach.
Yeah, and I would just add to that that a lot of the measures, of course, are applicable across governments, across the region. And as we think about transportation planning, of course, that may have a regional approach to that as well. Next question from Gloria. Any insight on why waste recycling, composting were so low in consideration for CPRG?
Gloria, they actually were in there, included in the diversion from landfills. So some of the projects that we mentioned as examples and that were submitted as potential implementation projects included community composting. And there was one local government who said they were doing a waste reduction plan, but we didn't have much insight into exactly what was in that plan. And so we decided to roll things up into a larger measure because we wanted anybody and everybody who potentially would be applying for waste reduction and recycling implementation proposals to be able to do so. And so that's why you have the one measure that is increase waste diversion from landfills. So we didn't leave it out. We just did not specifically break it down because we didn't have anybody who said that they were working on a proposal. And as I mentioned before, each measure, we had to calculate the greenhouse gas reduction potential for that measure near term and long term, as well as the co-benefits and implementing authority and all of that. And so we decided to just roll it up into one measure that was a good umbrella measure in case there were people we had not heard from that wanted to apply for funding. But we will be going into more detail for the MOCAP.
And if potentially the question was also inquiring about EPA's funding of implementation of that type of project, we don't have insight into why EPA funded different things or not other things, unfortunately.
John, that's a good take on it. I took it from the PCAP, but yes, you could probably go to the EPA website where they talk about the CPRG implementation grant funding and see what their considerations were. But yeah, I'm not sure if it was just the number of applications they received for that measure, those types of measures, or the greenhouse gas impact. We're not sure. So that's a good question.
Scott asked, is there an expectation that local governments develop a climate plan of their own under this umbrella? Will you offer TA to them, technical assistance, or is funding available already?
You know, Scott, I think ARC would love to see local governments develop their own climate plans of their own. And this would be a good foundation for that. We have a similar program that could be used as an example called Green Communities that was developed about 15 years ago to help local governments in their sustainability journey. And the local governments who have participated in the program said it was a great way to have a foundation or a framework for their sustainability plans and actions. And so that's kind of how I see this MOCAP plan. At this time, we do not have funding available, nor do we have funding to provide TA to them. However, we are always on the lookout for ways to expand our Green Communities program, as well as other technical assistance offerings.
I think that's a great answer. And I will just add that if you are a local government that is interested in developing your own climate plan, of course, these plans will be available to everyone. The PCAP is already available, and we would be very excited to hear about those plans of yours. And to Crystal's point, offer technical assistance in any capacity that we are able to, but we would very much be excited to hear about that. Next comment is from our colleague Sade, who I thank you, Sade, has posted information about the funding opportunities through the IIJA and IRA on ARC's website. So please take a look at that. Larry has said, sorry, I joined a bit late. Will a recording of this session be sent out? Yes, it will. And it is also going to be posted on ARC's website. Larry, if you scroll to the top of the chat, if that's possible, or I'll repost it so that you can go to our website. My colleague Sade has posted about the Green Communities program that people can go and read about. Thank you, Sade. And our other colleague, Tejas, has said comprehensive transportation plans are also opportunities for local governments to work on greenhouse gas reduction in the transportation sector. That is correct, and thank you, Tejas. Is the end of the comments or questions in the chat. We can certainly stay on for a few more minutes, but Crystal, I'll turn it back over to you.
All right. Well, thank you all for your questions. If there's a question that occurs to you after, oh, Scott has another question.
There we go. Thank you, Scott. With coming wave of electrification, how can work together to assure availability of power and that it is renewable? Great question, comment, Scott. Go ahead, Crystal.
John, do you want to talk a little bit about some of the other projects that we're working on related
Sure.
to this?
Scott and everyone, as you can see actually on the screen capture on the slide that Crystal is showing, ARC is currently at the latter stages of our regional transportation electrification plan. We're also working on something called the Georgia Energy Shed project with Georgia Tech and Southface. Both of those touch on electrification, energy sourcing, and kind of asking some of the questions that I will tease out from your comment. That is also being thought of in our climate pollution reduction grant. And I would just say that in addition to the fact that ARC is working on different plans associated with your question, we are also working harder to integrate each of these plans into other plans so that we're not just doing one-off planning, but that the things that we're learning from these different plans are feeding into other plans, feeding into other processes, programs and initiatives of ours, and that we're sharing that information out to local governments. So good comment, and I would say we're working on it and more to come.
Thanks, John. Oh, another one for you, John.
Thank you. This one's from Mendy. Have you considered dovetailing these plans and this data with hazard mitigation planning efforts in the region? I would say, Mendy, that's a great comment. We have had a meeting with GMA in the past, but that's a great thought as we think about additional ways to provide some of the resources that ARC is generating on both climate action in the greenhouse gas emissions reduction space, in some of the work we're doing on energy transition, as well as some of the work we're doing on resilience to climate change and extreme weather events, so that local governments can utilize those resources when they're doing their hazard mitigation planning. So that's a great comment and something that we can think more about as to how we offer up these resources to that specific planning effort.
And I'll just add for the MACAP, the Metropolitan Atlanta Climate Action Plan, EPA has stipulated that we focus only on greenhouse gas emissions reduction potentials, but where we can, we are calling out the co-benefit to hazard mitigation and climate resilience, so that information in the plan can be pulled into other planning efforts.
Very good comment. And then Scott, thank you for your comment. I will say this one out loud. Thank you for the information and excited about moving forward. Appreciate that.
Thank you, Scott. All right. Well, I will take my time wrapping up for a minute in case there's any other burning questions that anybody wants to submit. But if for some reason you think of something after this webinar closes, feel free to send an email to climate@atlantaregional.org and let us know. You can also submit comments and questions via the public input website, which I'll see if I can shift back one slide so you can have that again. But we have hopefully several different ways for you to get involved. And like I said, if you think of any audiences that you think would benefit from this information, please do let us know via the public input website. And we will do our best to connect with you. And we do plan to have webinars every other month. So now that you've attended this one, you will be getting emails about the future webinars, as we'll keep you updated as we progress through the climate action planning process. So thank you all for taking the time to be here today. And we look forward to putting together a first of its kind climate action plan for the Metro Atlanta statistical area. And we look forward to working with you all. And I'm going to close down the webinar now. You should receive an automated email with a copy of the recording. But if you don't, I will be posting the recording as well as these slides onto our CPRG website, as well as our public input website. It may take me 24 to 48 hours to do so, but please keep an eye out. And everybody have a great day.